leadership experiences or leadership chances for people, because we're getting at, me, you, and Stephanie, by presenting, we get to kind of lead, and somewhat the members are getting to do it just in the beginning of getting to talk to people, getting to interact with people. But it kind of made me think through. It's like, if we want this group to be developing leaders, how could we necessarily facilitate leadership experiences where you don't want to be too much, where maybe some people that aren't the best kind of take over and kind of deteriorate the quality of the event, but you also want to give that chance of kind of like potential leaders to kind of step up and shine. And I'm curious what your thoughts on that are.
It's tricky, like obviously with the meetup group, because it's all adults and it's all let's say consensual, right? Like, I mean, with students, they kind of have to be there. But I think the basic fundamental stays the same. So even with the students, that giving this student advice and allowing him to lead his own life, because that's really the most important thing for him, right? It's very tricky in the school system to implement, let's say, like, because I'll jokingly offer a student in the hallway, like I'll grab him, like, come on, you teach my class, like I'm bored, right? Like, come on, teach these kids. You took this course last semester, didn't you? So, but doing that in a very legitimate way can be tough, right? So particularly I'll do it with presentations and projects through the class where they get to be in front of the class, and eventually I'll build up to having question and answer sessions with, projects. But I do think it comes back to that core of allowing people tools to lead their own lives, right? And then with the meetup group, then extending, like, okay, you've seen this person's done one, maybe two, maybe three things. It's like, hey, come take a seat at our table now, and we want you to speak. Like, we want to sit and we want to listen to you. What do you have to offer, right? What can you tell us as well? Especially with the format that we have for the meetup group. With school, certainly, like, there is this one student who really likes playing the guitar and likes singing. So in the previous semester, when I was supervising at lunchtime, I would just, get a hold of a guitar for him, and he'd have a mini concert in this area. And so, spotlighting his opportunity to practice that skill. Whereas now, it's much trickier. The circumstances are different, but potentially, with the fitness center, it's like, hey, do you want to lead yourself to a better relationship with your body, fitness and health? It's tricky, right? I mean, you're dealing with so many different personalities and so many different, so both temperaments and archetypical energies, that it can be very overwhelming. And it's not often you get a student in a one-on-one situation, you can just talk to them and, like, guide them, right? It's most often that there's a group of kids, or if not, like, your whole class. And I'm still very young in my career, where I haven't really figured out, like, how do I one-on-one with everyone. The one-on-one isn't so much my particular skill set. Like, I do really well with groups. Breaking it down to the ones is a bit challenging for me.
So I'm curious, do you have any questions for me about leaderships, or where would you want to guide the discussion next?
Well, you spent dozens of hours listening to John Maxwell and listening to Evan Pagan and all these other mentors, so what is your hero story? What is your origin story? Right? What inspires you to listen to, 15 hours of one Maxwell program, let alone 100 of his programs potentially. Right?
That's a good question. I think they're almost two different things in a sense, the origin story versus the day-to-day motivation. Because when I think back to, like, the Lord of the Rings, the decision to start on the path to Mordor to destroy, like, the ring or whatever, is very different than when you're halfway up the mountain and your last loaf of bread falls off, and it's like it's
when you're looking at your friend and he's looking tasty, and
it's different, because to first make the journey, it's, in a lot of cases, you don't actually know what you're signing up for, and you're just so naive that you just kind of go for it. But it's almost a lot trickier to continue the journey as it gets tough, and all that kind of stuff. I think one of the things I'm probably most grateful for with life is that as you seem to get better, and as you better manage your life and you have more wisdom with it, I think it also gets easier. Like, things get more taken care of. So like with our event, like the meetup event, I was a health mess and Stephanie was pretty rough too, but you guys both stood up and kind of made sure that the host got cleaned and organized and ready for the event.
And I'll interject, like, because that even builds on like the barbecue that we had last year, just knowing like, okay, things got to get done, right?
Mm-hmm.
What needs to get done, and recognizing like, I'm not just gonna leave it all on Stephanie and be like, hey, where the hell's Trent, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I got to step up as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? But knowing that, okay, there's an event, there's people come in, certain things need to be clean, certain other things need to be arranged,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And so one of the things I'm very grateful for is that as I am a competent and effective leader, and like all the investment I've done into you and to Stephanie and stuff like that, it kind of leaves this reserve that when I'm not up to it or whatever, that it kind of is able to fill the gaps. But it's what motivates me and what gets me excited about listening to the Maxwell course, because I've probably listened to the Leader's Greatest Return at least 5 or 6 times now, but probably getting up to 10. Um, is that potential? Is that potential to kind of create change? Because like one of my core values is making the world a better place, and to me, it's like, so you kind of gave these examples from your mosque, and you had this one particular leader who can make a drive from Edmonton to Toronto, a relatively enjoyable experience.
He convinced maybe 12 to 15 people to
Mm-hmm.
do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not nothing, right?
Yeah.
That's a long trip.
It is, and it's not a trip I would sign up for very lightly. I'm not really sure what you could do convince me, but to me, it's like, imagine if you had an organization of competent leaders with that capability. Maybe not clones of each other, but if you had throughout the whole organization tremendous leaders who were able to kind of inspire that trust and courage, and take people on a journey and actually have them enjoy it, because it's one thing to sell somebody on a journey, but it's another thing to actually take them on that journey and make the journey the most enjoyable experience as possible. And so to me, it's like that's what makes the world a better place, is the more of these transformational leaders that I can help grow and develop, and kind of help them to go and help other people grow and develop. To me, that's what makes the whole thing better. Like, imagine a school system of like leaders who, again, aren't clones of yourself, but are competent and skilled in their own respects, of that they're relational, getting to know people, and they're kind of giving their own flavor advice based on the king, warrior, lover, magician, and connecting with different students. And it's not that one person has to do it all, but it's that if we had, even if half the teachers were great leaders and stuff like that, that would just be a transformational experience in so many respects, that you could come to school and you could come out the other end a different person. Because like one of the things that Maxwell talked about is that you can teach what you know, but you reproduce what you are. And if you're kind of this frumpy, overweight, like your life's just not very well put together, you're not really recreating or reproducing something that is of tremendous value. But it's like, if you've been able to put your own health together, and you've been able to put your own finances together and all these kind of things, it's like you're going to be able to naturally kind of through osmosis pass that on to the students and everybody around. And to me, it's the truest type of pay it forward kind of mentality, because like the idea of just buying somebody coffee at like Starbucks or something like that, it's like, yeah, it's nice, but I'm not necessarily seeing that that's going to be transformational or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you put yourself together and then you learn how to put other people together in kind of a non-authoritarian way, I think that that's the best way to make the world better. And those are the kind of leaders I wish I would have had. Like, if I had these transformational leaders throughout school or throughout business or throughout whatever it is, that they kind of were like, hey, like, who are you? What's your story? What's going on? Here's all my experiences. Here's all the lessons I've kind of learned. And here, let me try to pass on some of the ones that might be relevant for you in your time period right now. Because that's one of the things that Kathy actually brought up, is like, how do I know what's going to help you or Stephanie grow? And because her kind of natural thought is like, you need to create a checklist and you take everybody through the same checklist. And I'm like, not really, because like Najib is very different than Stephanie, and like what you're needing to learn and grow and develop right now is very different than what she's interested in or needs to work on and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So and that's, I guess, one of my strengths too, is that individualization, is that I can really tell what makes that person, and it actually makes me. It's hard for me to talk to groups because I feel all different individuals, and they all kind of need different messages. So it's tricky for me to tailor a message to a group.
Mm-hmm. And I would say I'm very much the opposite. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, here's like what's a good message that could be useful to all of the students. Funny
Mm-hmm.
enough, I even have like a imaginary speech of like, if the grade 12s or any group of kids at my school ask me like, hey, can you give us a speech before you potentially leave? It's like I have 2 to 3 ideas of what I'd like to talk about, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I guess just to mention particularly the primary one would be to make a plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And connecting that back to leadership of especially with this week and all the circumstances in my life, either life will beat you into what it wants you to be, or you could plan for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not like it's not as if I didn't recognize that I had good leadership qualities in me from a young age. It's not like I wasn't told when I was 20, 21, like, hey man, like you're a good leader, like you should seek to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Even to this day, like I have friends saying like, Najib, you should seek to be like education minister.
Mm-hmm.
And to me it's like, whoa, relax man, like I don't want to be in charge of that many people. But next thing you know, life starts hitting you over the head with a baseball bat, like go do this, like this is what you're supposed to be. Or you could set out a rough plan and move towards it, right? So I do think a lot of people aren't leading themselves, and to help the people, what I've found is just listening to them and then potentially offering them not necessarily